Good afternoon, everybody. Happy almost Friday. All right, while we're waiting for folks to come in, we're going to look at phylogeny and cladograms today. So if you would read over the page in Canvas, we're going to watch a video and do a worksheet. Hopefully you finished your dichotomous key activity, and we'll give time for that as well. And then I'll kind of go back over what you should have done with that as well. All right, so again, while you're waiting, if you would look this part over in Canvas, we'll get started when I think most everybody's here. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right, so again, let me let this person in first before it's start. All right, so again, today's objective is to introduce phylogeny and cladograms. I do have a worksheet that goes along with it. We're going to watch a video. And then after that, I'll give you time to finish your taxonomy gizmo, which today was the last day for that as far as being on time. And then we'll look at getting what you need to do with today's worksheet. Okay. All right. I think almost everybody's here. So we'll go ahead and start talking about this. All right, so the word today is phylogeny. It's the study of the evolutionary relationship amongst organisms. And another way that they represent this is by using a cladogram, which is kind of called a family tree, so to speak. So if you were drawing a family tree, it would look like that, but with modern classification, okay, keep still. It's going to look more like this. So as far as, again, we talked about evolution, how this tree represents how they feel organisms are related to, and you will learn that their position on the tree also speaks to how closely related they think you are to the other organism. All right, so we're going to come back to that. I'm going to let you come back and read that over, but we're going to watch a short video. Uh, he's going to talk about phylogeny and the tree of life. Oops, why do we not have sound?
Natural selection and the ways that populations of organisms can change dramatically over long periods of time, just like slow geological processes that create mountains and canyons. Over the 500 million years since the Cambrian explosion, an unbelievable array of organisms has come to be, most of which are gone, but plenty of which are still here. We can explore the world and find strange creatures in the jungle and at the bottom of the ocean, and we can look at fossils to see what once was. So how do we keep track of all these different kinds of life? Which creatures are more closely related and which are more distant? To stay organized, we use something called the tree of life. We can think of the trunk of this tree as the unicellular common ancestor of every living thing in history. Of course, this is long extinct, but it produced other organisms which are represented by different branches, and these in turn produced other organisms, and so on, until millions of years later, here we are, along with whales and birds and porcupines and bears. The process by which one species produces a new species is called speciation, and this is the bridge between microevolution, which looks at changes in allele frequencies, and macroevolution, which is a broad pattern that produces new organisms that look totally different from pre-existing ones. We have a way of classifying an organism that tells us exactly how it is related to everything else. How recently or distantly, and every organism belongs to a particular species. These are groups of populations that have sufficiently similar genetic material such that they are capable of breeding to generate viable, fertile offspring. If two organisms can do this, they are of the same species. If not, they aren't. But before we start with the trunk of the tree of life, let's quickly recall exactly what happened in the early history of life on Earth.
I get the feeling that's a commercial. Mhm.
We've already talked about the origin of life, but let's review a few points to put things in perspective. From the famous Miller-Urey experiment, we saw how conditions on the early Earth, just after it cooled enough for liquid water to exist, were such that amino acids and nitrogenous bases could form spontaneously. These were able to polymerize to form long chains, and when some of these were by chance encapsulated in a self-generating membrane, like the way soap micelles form, the first protocell was born. Once nucleic acids became self-replicating, the concept of inheritance took hold. We also discussed how multicellular life arose from unicellular life, which resulted in an even greater variety of organisms. This is admittedly a speculative series of events, and one could go into much greater detail on any individual step. But it is rooted in firm science and testable hypotheses. So let's move to the time period where an extensive fossil record begins. We can look at fossils to learn about living organisms that existed at any point over the past several billion years, which gives us incredible insight into the history of the Earth. We divide this history into different eons, beginning with the Hadean eon, where the Earth was still a hot ball of molten rock. In the Archean eon, prokaryotic life arose, living alone for 1.5 billion years. This is when the Earth became covered in oxygen as the product of photosynthesis. In the Proterozoic eon, eukaryotic life evolved through endosymbiosis, and eventually multicellular eukaryotic life through cell specialization. This eon ends with the Cambrian explosion. And lastly, the Phanerozoic eon starts a little after animals show up on the scene and is divided into the Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic eras. This whole eon is around 500 million years long, starting just before animals make it onto dry land. Dinosaurs dominate the Mesozoic era, and humans show up only in the last sliver of the Cenozoic era. The boundaries between these eras and eons mark huge extinction events that can be seen in the fossil record, and we continue to examine fossils to learn about life from all periods of biological history. Now that we are up to speed with the history of life, we want to know about the phylogeny of various species. This is their evolutionary history or ancestry, and the discipline of taxonomy is what we use to classify every species in the context of its ancestry. For
For over 30 years, PetSmart Charities has helped more than...
For greater context, we look at the tree of life. This tree has many branches, where different species evolved from a common ancestor. The more recently two species converge as you go down, the more recent their common history, and the more closely related they are. As you continue to go down the tree, species become less and less related. So humans and chimpanzees, whose branches are very close to one another, diverged from a common ancestor only a couple million years ago, whereas humans and jellyfish are much more distantly related, having diverged hundreds of millions of years ago, when all life was in the sea. If we get all the way to the bottom, the trunk of this tree marks the beginning of life on Earth, a single-celled organism that everything alive today is descended from. Since we don't know precisely what that was, we start with what we know, and at the most basic level, we consider three domains of life. These are bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Bacteria and archaea are the unicellular prokaryotes we talked about, and eukarya is all eukaryotes. This means unicellular protists as well as all multicellular life on Earth, including every plant and animal there is. Within the domain eukarya, there are several kingdoms. Animalia contains all animals. Plantae contains all plants. Fungi contains all mushrooms and molds. And Protista contains all the rest, although many biologists don't recognize this as a valid kingdom any longer. Within each kingdom, there are several phyla. Within the animal kingdom, there are 9 major ones. There is the phylum Arthropoda, which contains all kinds of bugs and lobsters and creepy crawlies. Mollusca, which contains octopi and snails and other such things. And most notably, there is Chordata. This phylum includes any animal with a spinal cord, and the divergence of vertebrates and invertebrates was a major step in evolution. Within each phylum, we can find different classes of organism. Chordata contains the class Reptilia, which are reptiles like crocs and snakes and lizards. Amphibia, which are amphibians like toads and frogs. And Mammalia, which are all the mammals, from kangaroos to elephants. Humans belong to Mammalia, and within this class there are a number of orders. The order Cetacea contains all the whales and dolphins. Carnivora contains things like bears and weasels. Then there are the primates. That's got everything from orangutans to lemurs, and humans are in there too. Within the order of primates, there are several families. The family Hominidae contains all the great apes, so that's us again. Within Hominidae, every organism belongs to a particular genus, and that's where we diverge from the apes. Our genus is called Homo, which means man in Latin. Within a genus, there are several species, and all the species within the genus Homo are now extinct, except for Homo sapiens, and that's us. The species that came before us, Homo erectus, Homo habilis, and many others, are all gone. And Homo sapiens, which means wise man, sits at the very top of the tree, the only species to have evolved an intelligence that spawned complex civilizations and information storage, first as written language, and eventually the omnipresent internet, which you're using right now. So every species can be classified, and there are mnemonic devices that can help us remember the different tiers of categorization. Do kangaroos prefer cake or frosting, generally speaking? Or did King Philip come over from Great Spain? You can even make up your own. To review, we humans are collectively the species Homo sapiens. We belong to the genus Homo, the family Hominidae, the order Primates, the class Mammalia, the phylum Chordata, the kingdom Animalia, and the domain Eukarya. We can trace a path from the tip of our branch all the way to the trunk, and every organism on Earth will converge with our path at some point, whether very recent or very distant, which means that every living thing is related in some way. To see precisely how related two species are, we could use sophisticated techniques like ribosomal RNA sequencing, or we can simply examine homologies. These are similarities between organisms, be they genotypic or phenotypic, and they typically suggest common ancestry as an organism's evolutionary history is documented in its genome. But to get into these details for specific animals, we will have to wait until the zoology course. And a discussion of everything that's inside a human will have to wait for the anatomy and physiology course, both of which will come in the future. For now, let's move forward and wrap.
Okay, so what I want you to do, right, he mentioned that you can come up with a mnemonic. So there are two mnemonics here that he gives. I want you to write them down. Then I want to challenge you to make your own. So on the worksheet that you're doing today, you need to also submit your own mnemonic. All right, so you need to learn these in order because the question is always which one, and you had this question on one of your worksheets already, which category includes the others. So when we start with domain, domain is the broadest one. And if we were looking at this on the triangle, that would be the broad base of broad, and actually it's upside down. So it's the broad top of the triangle. And then kingdoms, there are several kingdoms under the domain. There are several phylum under the kingdom, several classes under phylum, several orders under class, several families under order, and then several genuses under family. But when we get down to species, you usually have one organism, and that's very, very specific. So up to here, everybody can be related. But when you get to species, you're talking about one kind of organism. All right, so what I want you to do is and then you need to know this order. So what they've come up with as a catchy sentence for you to remember is, do kangaroos prefer cake or frosting, generally speaking? So write that one down. Then I'll switch to the other one. And notice the first letter of each of these words is the classification system in order. Okay. Do kangaroos prefer cake or frosting, generally speaking? Then I'm going to show you the next one, the one that I was most familiar with, because this one is new for me. Actually, no, there's two more. All right, this is the one I was most familiar with. Did King Philip come over from Great Spain? And actually, I learned King Philip closed our front gate, sir. Or kindly, please close our front gate, sir, was what I had learned. But this is interesting. And then there was one more. So I want you to come up with your own. All right, this one's kind of interesting. Don't keep putting cheese on festive gnomes, Sheila. That's kind of weird. I can't imagine. And you need to come up with something that you're going to remember. So when you make up one, make up something that you will remember. And then it's important that you do, because this is a question on the milestone. They are going to ask you about classification. So come up with a mnemonic that you will remember. But these are three examples of mnemonics that you can remember. Alrighty, that being said, so back to Canvas. Okay, so I'm going to leave you to read this if you've already done all of your other assignments. If you have not, let me go back over what you should do as far as well, I'm going to get to today's assignment in a minute, but let me remind you of what you need to do with this one, because some of you still haven't turned this one in, and I emphasize today it's late. So you need to make sure that it's in. Technically, today is like Friday, so the gradebook updates. So you don't want to have zeros at the beginning of the quarter. You want to make sure all of your assignments are turned in. All right, so you went on the Gizmo site, you clicked all the things that it asked you to click for the snake and the evergreen and the fish, cartilaginous fish. Last step, they look for you to create your own system. All you really had to do for this, again, was take this two phrase statements that they already had in there, rewrite them so that these spaces over here actually name these four pictures. So there's four pictures up here. There should be four names here. So whatever you put for 2 and 3 should actually lead to naming those four organisms. Then you had to create your own. So then you had to go back and pick one of the other organisms and do the same thing. Create four on a separate sheet of paper. So on this one, you have on a separate sheet of paper. You did a screenshot of four, not only do 4 pictures so that you're only creating a box similar to the one that's there. And again, from whichever organism you pick, start at the beginning, get the 2 statements that you start with. One of those should say go to step 2. Step 2 should end up with the name of one of your organisms. Step 2B should name another one. And if it wasn't one of those, then step 3, if it was B, it should be a description for step 3. So figure out which ones took you to step 3, and then you should be able to name 2 of them that follow those descriptions. All right. And then you turn that in. So you're turning both the document, the whole document, and an extra page with your Gizmo. And then some of you have done it already, but you need to make sure that you do the assessment that is on the Gizmo website specifically, because that's going to record there for me. So the worksheet is worth 55, the quiz is worth 5, so the whole grade is going to be worth 60 points. Okay, that's that. So that's old news, new news, new news, today. So this one you should try to get to if you have already done everything else. And this one is simple. It has 2 things. The first part is similar to what you've already done. So you've got 4 pictures and you've got a dichotomous key. So you need to put the names of these things underneath each picture. So you're going to type that. All right. Then the second one, you are going to create a tree, but this is not living things. It's just random office supplies. But you're going to think about how each of these are related to each other, so that your tree that you draw should show the ones that are closely related close together, and when your branches that are furthest apart should end with whichever one has the least in common with all the rest of the stuff. All right, so today, all right, so yes, I'm going to stop talking so that you can get to submitting the Gizmo and then get to this one if you can. Okay, but notice we're moving. So some of y'all are taking too long to do other assignments, and we have to keep moving because milestones are in 1 month, 1 month from tomorrow, the 21st. So we need to get a few more topics covered before the milestones start. So we don't have time for you to spend all of your class time doing nothing. Okay, so I will keep briefly going over stuff and giving you time to do it, but you won't have forever to do it. All right. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. I'm not sure for science. I know for English and math there is. I think science is just a one document assignment. But I will check on that. That's a question I will ask. But I know for sure English has 2 parts and math has 2 parts. But not. It's been a while since I've done the milestone because I've been teaching in other states that don't do the milestone. So glad to be back in Georgia with things I'm familiar with. All righty. Any questions? Any questions? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing so I can do attendance. Check on y'all on GoGuardian to make sure you're actually doing your work. The video that I showed is also on your playlist in, make sure. Yes, it is. It's on the playlist in YouTube. So if you need to watch that again, it is there. And again, the gizmo is in Clever, Explore Learning. And just remember before you leave, after you submitted, before you leave, do the 5-question quiz. Hmm. Okay, Jacob, I see you've turned in your worksheet. Make sure you go back to Gizmo and do the assessment. Keila, I have the assessment, but now you need to turn in the worksheet. And Jacob, you didn't do the part C activity, so I reassigned it. That's up to you. Did you do that so bad? All right, you got to remember that when you're doing the cla- uh, cladogram, it's got to have, it's got to start with a single branch, so the branch, a single stem that branches out. So you have to find something that they all have in common to begin with, and then branch out from there. I'm sorry, my volume was off because I was printing. All right, Kendall, tell me which animal that you want me to show you. The snake. Okay, let's look at Mr. Snake. All right. You okay, well, let me start with this snake. All right, so and if you use this one as one of your pictures, you would start with these two statements here would be the first things that you write down. This goes for everybody on your extra page. If you pick snakes, this will be the first two statements because they're going to be the same no matter which picture you pick. That's going to be the first two statements on all of them. Okay, so those would be the first. If you pick snake as your part C, number 2, do 4 pictures and write these two statements, excuse me, on the first 2 lines. So one would be go to 2 and the other would be go to 3. All right, so let me go back up here to the top. All right, so looking at this picture, says there are rattles at the end of its tail. Yes, it does. And the other choices, it has no rattles at the end of its tail. So say yes. All right, the snake has a rusted color stripe down its back. And I don't see any stripes on this one. Or it does not have a rust colored stripe down its back. So we're going to pick this one. Okay. All right, now it says the snake does not have rings on its tail. The snake has rings on its tail. These, I guess these black and white things over here, we can consider that to be rings on the tail. And so that would be the one that you picked. Okay. And let's pick another one. All right, this guy, he does not have rattle on the end of his tail. So we go with that one, no rattle. Does not have bright red and yellow bands. He does. So the snake has bright and red, yellow bands. So we pick that one. All right, the red bands touch black. And this is one of those where they tell you whether it's poisonous or not. Does the red band touch the black? So we're looking at this, and yes, our red touches black. The red touches yellow, so it's not red is not touching yellow. Red is touching black. So that's what it is. Okay, so you got to really look at the picture and examine the picture in order to make sure these are correct. I'm going to skip to D. All right, this one has rattles at the end of its tail. Has a rust-colored tip down, stripe down its back. It doesn't have what? No, does not have a rust-colored stripe down its back. All right, the snake does not have tail rings. Let's call it has tail rings. Let's see. So we're going to call these brown. It looks like alternating brown and light, dark brown and light brown. I'm going to call those rings. Oops, I guess they're not rings. Okay, so those are not rings. And then if you're wrong, just hit back button and select the other one, and then you'll be right. Okay, let's look at the buttercup one since you asked about that. For the E. Okay, the flower has white petals. It does not. It has yellow petals. The stem is greater than, so you want to go from the bottom to the flower at the top. So it is longer than 20 centimeters. All right, it has leaf with 3 or more spears. All right, so these would be spears. They're not rounded. So we're going to pick that one. All right, and each one of these has 5 little, if you count all the little pokey things, that would be 5 spheres as opposed to 3. No, I guess not. 3. Okay. Let me go back. It has 3 or more spheres. Okay. Got that. And then it's still saying it has 3 spheres. Okay. I guess that's the one that got you. Because even though it looks like a hand, 5 would be as if they had all the, even though that looks like, actually that would be more than 5, but it's still 3 distinct leaves stemming from one section. So I guess that's what they're talking about. And again, folks, if it tells you you're wrong, you hit the back button and come back again and start again. And then you can get it right. So this is one of these activities, it's hard to get the wrong answer because you just hit the back button. And trust that the gizmo is right. All right, anybody else having an issue? Okay, and again, you see you had two choices. The ones at the top are going to be the long and streamlined, and the ones at the bottom are going to be flat and wide. So this one is going to be flat and wide. Its nose comes to a sharp point, and that does nose. This one is a sharp point, not rounded. Tail is long like a whip. So that's a stingray. See what the other one is. Okay, so this one has fins, not like a whip. Okay, all right, I hope you see the difference between that tail and this tail. That's definitely a fin. Okay. As opposed to, now that's a hammer as opposed to a shovel. But again, notice they start off with the same 2 general characteristics, and then it gets different. So when you get down to part C, you're looking for the one line that actually takes you to the name of the organism, and that's the line that you're going to write on the worksheet. So whatever the last statement is. Okay, so if you were doing this one on your worksheet, it would have been the dorsal, the line choice A, and then you would have the name of the fish. It's basically you're just looking for 2 lines. When you get to that part C, you're just looking for 2 lines. The first 2 couplets, and then the 1 line that actually takes you to the name of the fish, or whichever one you're working on. All right, that one was short. We have a lot of these here in Georgia. There's our Christmas tree. Let's see how that goes. All right, that last one, because they gave you the cross-section picture here. So that would have helped you with that. Again, folks, don't forget to do the assessment. Ooh. And we got a little more than 5 minutes left to class. I know we don't use the word homework a lot, but you got homework if you haven't finished this today, because we need to move on. You need to be able to work on your um, other worksheet. Okay, folks, if you have no questions for me, um, again, please just make sure that you get those turned in. Oops. I got 2 people who have turned it in. Everybody else has homework. All right, you have a great weekend. See you next week.